Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Open Up Live Talk Show. My name is Will Barbour. I'm the host of monthly webinars, funding coordinator at Voice of Men 360, and here to do Open Up today. Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020. It's based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360 was born out of seeing a tremendous need and stepping up to provide services to help support and overcome men's and boys' life challenges. We are part of International Men's Day. International Men's Day has been serving for over 21 years, and so far 90 countries around the world joined together and are doing various activities regularly. International Men's Day follows 6 pillars, which is the overall well-being of boys and men. We follow in the same footsteps. So why open up? Because we men do not open up our hearts, and we need to be willing to share our matters with anyone and open up more in general. So that is why we want to create an open space to allow opening up. And our goal is to make a positive impact on someone's life through this program. Open Up is on Sundays at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We bring an individual to show up and open up. So before I introduce our speaker today, I have to go over a little disclaimer. We would like to remind you that Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with good faith towards peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episode are those of our speakers and do not represent Voice of Men 360. Don't quote us. We're not pros. We're not offering medical advice. We're not offering professional advice. We are here to talk. Thank you. So today we have Rick Ornelas here with us. Rick is a ultimate success coach. That's a trademark. Best-selling author and founder of iSpark Change. He helps entrepreneurs flourish personally and professionally by eliminating the roadblocks, preventing their success. Rick wasn't always interested in helping others on a global scale, despite being pushed repeatedly in that direction by a near-death experience. Wow, we're going to have to talk about that. Family tragedies and deaths. We don't have to talk about that any more than you want to. It wasn't until the ever-worsening times of 2020 when he was anxious, isolated, and desperate that he finally got the wake-up call. His awakening came in the form of divine inspiration and awe-inspiring spiritual connection when he least expected it. He went from isolated and hopeless to writing a best-selling book, 12 Hours of Heaven, Lessons for a Better World in under 3 months, while envisioning and creating an incredible future. Rick has been featured as an expert in multiple media outlets, including national, international television, and radio. He's a regular writer for Lifehack, a guest contributor for various websites, and has inspired listeners across the globe as guests on over 50 podcasts. His next book, 12 Hours of Heaven, Time on Earth, is in the works. Well, welcome to Open Up.
Hey, well, thank you very much for the kind intro, and thank you very much for having me on Open Up. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Cool. So did you have anything you wanted to say to address everybody before we get into our discussion, like questions and conversations or anything?
Not necessarily questions or conversations or anything, just that when Sivam had reached out about being on the show, that I was very excited about being here because of what Voice of Men 360, what you stand for and everything, and the positivity, and that all resonates quite a bit with what I'm about and when iSpark Change is about. So that I was really looking forward to having the conversation and seeing what kind of impact we can have on others with our chat.
Awesome. Yeah, we all have something to contribute, and every perspective is welcome. And you sort of need spaces to come together as men and see what we can do, right, to address life's challenges and stuff, right?
Exactly.
So, will you be able to share, what was your turning moment in that introduction? You had 2020, you weren't doing so great, and then suddenly you had a turning moment, and now things are going great. So what happened?
Yes, it was a big turning moment for me, Will, because life was going along very comfortably, as it does for a lot of us. I was going along. I had my family. I had work. Everything was seemingly fine. And then when the pandemic hit, everything got turned upside down. I mean, not in the sense not just in the sense that, hey, now we're in quarantine, hey, there's this worldwide challenge for everybody, but in the sense that my coaching business that I had had since 2015 was now not, I won't say failing, but was now being significantly affected. So I had many of my clients needed to stop services. Many said they wanted to put them on hold. One of my biggest clients that I was the acting COO for, I had to leave that position to help the business for, keep the business alive. And so I found myself just in a super uncomfortable place. And I'm someone that, like a lot of us, we like that kind of a false sense of control, that false sense of, oh, hey, I have a handle on what's, I have a handle and control on things. But I realized that quickly that wasn't very much the case. And that's where, first I became anxious and depressed a little bit and just uncertain and fearful of what was going to happen. How was I going to pay my bills, take care of my family, all that kind of stuff. And I quickly realized just within the span of a couple of weeks that who was I to think that way when there was others that were far worse off than I was. There was others that were suffering. There was people that were dying. There was people that didn't have, life was far more challenging for them. And that's when I decided to write and decided to share what was going on with me. And then more importantly, to write my book that had been in my head for 20 years. And I just hadn't written it for a number of reasons. But that was a big turning point for me, because that's where I realized that, hey, I needed to start, I had some gifts and some ideas and expertise that I needed to share with others to help inspire them and to help, make things a little easier for them.
So when you say easier for them, like, do you mean that in like a supporting way, like a mentorship way, or in a way that you're showing your vulnerability, almost like a youth side of it, and that we're all still learning kind of ways, like a work in progress? Like, how do you see engaging with people to be supportive with your medium and your books you've written so far?
Yeah, that's an excellent way to look at it, Will. It's really a combination of all of the above, of everything that you said. One, it's that in that mentorship coach capacity, because I've been a coach for years. I mean, even going way back to when I was younger in sports and everything. So being that coach, being that mentor, helping people that are looking for guidance and they didn't know where to turn. We did through iSpark Change, we did this 5-day challenge called Level Up Your Life for Gen Z, because they were struggling more than any other generation in terms of mental health and with the pandemic. And so we did this 5-day challenge where, it was a virtual challenge. We were on Zoom, but we were supporting them, helping them gain control of their emotions and their life during the 5-day challenge. But so that's first way, like you said, that mentorship, that coaching, that support. And then a combination with that would be that vulnerability, would be showing everybody that, hey, just because I'm a man or a father, or I have this title or whatever, doesn't mean that I'm not affected. Doesn't mean that I'm not hurting just like everybody else. And I think, when we connect that way, when we show, kind of like what you were talking about when you open the show, but when we share with others that, hey, we're real people. We have our insecurities and our vulnerabilities, and sure, we have our strengths as well. They all make up the person that, who we are. And I really feel there's comfort in that for everyone, is to know that, hey, it's kind of like the saying, misery loves company, but at a simpler place, just meaning that, if people know, like, hey, well, I'm not the only one, I'm not in this alone, kind of thing. That's where a lot of support can come for people, because they go, okay, now, I know that don't have to go through this alone. It's not just I'm not in this alone, but I don't have to go through this alone.
Yeah, that loneliness is a really big deal for men, especially, right? Like that's a major driver for our suicide stats in youth, especially because and in like divorce scenarios too, because a lot of our support networks are in our partnerships. So anytime those fall apart or specific friendships fall apart, then you're alone, right? So that loneliness is a huge thing for men. But I guess with that mentorship and youth sort of perspective, like how do you think your father-son relationship played into that? Because like a lot of that sense of perspective of that is based on what you establish when you're growing up, right?
Yeah, that is an excellent excellent question, Will, because with my father, I mean, I always looked up to him. My father was a much older father. When I was born, he was 49 years old when I was born. I was the youngest of five, and when my parents got married, he was older, 16 years older than my mom. So he was a lot older, but I always looked up to him. He was always in many ways my hero, and he really ingrained in us from a very early age, myself and my sisters, and just in our family in general, that family, faith, and love were the most important, components of a family, of relationships, and that's something that has been prevalent throughout my life and is still a big part of my life to this day. And so I think there's plenty of things that I learned from him, like you said, in that father-son relationship. There's plenty of things that I learned from him, plenty of lessons that he taught me along the way. And then, just being younger. And then if you get to where I was older, so, the last probably, he passed away in 2019 at the age of 96. So he had lived a very long life. And he really went through he really had a lot of growth in the last probably 15 or so years of his life, to 15, 15 to, yeah, probably around 15 years of his life is where he had a ton of growth. I mean, he had struggled with alcoholism for, the majority of his life, and didn't really get that under control until probably like the last 10. And just in many ways, our relationship became so much closer and so much more beautiful in those final, that final 5 years, or 5 to 10 years. And that's where I really learned, because he was always very strong, very stoic, disciplinarian, all of those things that you would have expected from his generation. But he in many ways, he helped me learn to be that vulnerable individual. And he was always just completely genuine. But he didn't start showing that side of him, that emotional side, that vulnerable side, where it really wasn't until, like I said, it was like this last, 10, 15 years of his life, when he had grandkids and really started to show his love in many different ways. And so, I'm very grateful that I had all that time with him, because that's where I think it really had the biggest impact, was in those last few years, and the impacts that you were talking about.
In the earlier years, like leading up to those 10 years, could you see signs of that? Like, was he still like a provider? Was he still like the breadwinner and stuff like that? Like, were there aspects of providership and support and love that he might have been showing in a distorted way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So yes. So when I was young, for example, I mean, he worked 2 jobs to put us through school, to put us into, so we could be in private school. He worked 2 jobs. I mean, he was working at a hospital at night as a janitor. And he was an accountant. He was an accountant in the daytime, and he was working as a janitor at night, just to make extra money to put us through private school so we could have a better education. And he would, helped us all get our first cars and all. Yeah, I mean, just all different ways. He showed his love in many ways, even though, like I said, I mean, he was struggling with alcoholism and everything. He still showed love in so many different ways. He was always there to support us. He was always there to help us. I mean, he would, he's the kind of person that would give you the shirt off his back without any questions asked. I mean, just instantly. And not just for myself, but really for, not for his family, but for anybody. And so, yeah, he definitely showed it in those ways. And, sometimes clouded because of his own, things he's struggling with, like the alcohol, but
of course.
yeah, but I mean, always very powerful. I always saw it as love. It just was, like you said, it took different forms, and maybe sometimes seemed a little distorted.
Right. Yeah, but I think that's important to consider, like generational changes, right? Like you mentioned, you're talking about your book. You mentioned how Gen Z has a lot more mental health, but that's diagnosed mental health, right? Like your father's generation had all the same mental health issues. They just went undiagnosed. So
Yeah,
maybe he just needed a little
absolutely.
serotonin, right? A little SSRI might have made it so he didn't need to drink, right?
Yeah,
But we didn't think about
it's so
depression
true.
back then.
Yeah, it's very true. It's an excellent point. It's an excellent point because his generation, them coming out of various things going on in society, wars and all that stuff. I mean, they were just super stoic, never went to the doctor, never looked for anything. A great thing about Gen Z, as you mentioned, is they are far more open to mental health resources and to getting help, getting therapy. And they're open about it, and that wasn't the case. And even for myself, I'm part of Gen X, but even for my generation, I've had to grow into that. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that are still, they still hold on to that stoicism, but that's something that I've grown into in, probably the last 10 to 15 years of my life.
Well, that's good. Like honestly, gender roles and how that changes through time, and like mother and father roles and stuff like that. So showing that stoicism, obviously there's a benefit to that too, right? Because you still have to go to work, like you still have to put food on the table, or you're neglecting your kids, right? Like obviously we need to treat our mental health and nurse our wounds and have supports for it, but when there's no supports and we have dependents, then you got to go to work, right? So you need a little bit of that stoicism, right?
Yeah,
But
I think it's a balance, like you say. Well, I think it's a balance for bringing different aspects of your personality and different aspects of who you are to your relationships and to the world, because that's what makes us. That's the beautiful part that makes us who we are. I mean, if we were all just the same, it's like robots. It's like it's not. It wouldn't be as enjoyable. But the fact that something like, I'm sure I have a ton of my strength that I've gotten from my father and my mother. I mean, she's always been very strong, dealing with my father when I was younger and everything. I mean, I'm sure I've gotten a ton of strength from them in different capacities. Whether it's the stoicism or the discipline. I mean, my kids they're great. My three daughters, and they're very disciplined. I know I learned that from my parents. So yeah, you take all those, and then they kind of evolve and grow in the person that you are.
so then how did those like evolve and grow together into the ultimate success coach concept and like work you've been doing? Like how does it come together into helping your clients?
I think it's been a combination of really all different aspects of my life. Will, because as I was saying, I was involved in. I've always been, the quote unquote leader, going back to when I was young, and that I know I got from my parents. That I know for a fact. But even going back to, when I'm in early years of school, and either in leadership in school or in sports, or different things, being the captain and different stuff, that was always something that I know they had ingrained in me early on. And then with that foundation, that's what I built upon that as I went into the working world, as I went into university and then into the working world, is that I was always looking for those type of roles. And I really feel that it was constant development over time. So initially, when I get in the working world, I start in like sales type roles, and I learn there, and then move into management, and then training and development, and different corporate roles of executive leadership. And so I think you have that foundation, those seeds are planted when you're young, and then you nurture those throughout life. And they were nurtured throughout my life in the different experiences that I have, that I'm taking and learning from all these different experiences. So I'm learned from my parents, then I'm learning from, how to connect with people, let's say when I'm in sales roles, then I'm learning how to lead others in management roles, and then learning how, strategy and how to run a company in other executive roles. And then all of those, and then even working with some startups and learning all the challenges that go through there and failure. Taking all of that is what has helped with my coaching, and helps me to teach others and help them evolve and grow, so their businesses can flourish. Because I've been, for nearly 30 years, I've gone through the ups and downs of business in different capacities. And, when you have that kind of experience, someone that's not as far along the journey, you can, in essence, be that guide. You can be that person that's like, hey, you can avoid, like you're saying in my bio, you can avoid this pitfall, hey, just take this road over here, and that's going to be a far better road than going through this one where you're going to have, all these ups and downs. And
Right.
sure, I like people to learn, some of these things on their own, because they have to go through some of these challenges to really evolve and grow and have success. But they can take some guidance. It can make the journey a little bit better when they have some guidance. So.
Right. So where were you on your journey during 12 Hours of Heaven, Lessons for a Better World? And like, how has that changed going into your next book, 12 Hours of Heaven, Time on Earth?
So where I was is I had my initial coaching business, strategic medical coaching, teaching doctors of all different types, MDs, chiropractors, psychologists, different types of clinicians, leadership and business development, to teach them how to have successful and thriving practices. So I had that business since 2015. That's the one that started to suffer when pandemic hit and people had to close down, and they couldn't utilize my services. So the revenue, went to almost nothing. And in 2020, when I found myself with all the time, that's when I started writing 12 Hours of Heaven. And in the time of writing, I'm writing about this spiritual content, because the story is a fictional story about an angel that comes down from heaven, and he's sent down from heaven to help 10 different people. And as I'm writing about this angel helping others, that's where I start to get in a really spiritual place, a place where I feel really connected with God. And I feel as if the story is just being given to me, and I'm just typing. Like my writing went from 500 words a day to, over 2,000, where I'd like write a whole chapter in a couple hours. And I felt so spiritually connected that I was having dreams and visions of more things that I was supposed to create. And I felt this deep calling to do more, like I originally felt with the book, but to do more. And that's where the idea for I Spark Change was born, for the organization I Spark Change, to empower others to spread positive change and elevate their social impact. And that idea, and everything that would become, came out of that spiritual connection, that spiritual place that I was in during my writing. And since then, in that time, I've it's continued to evolve, continue to grow over the past couple years. And now in my writing, I find myself kind of yearning to get into that place, because I'm not writing with as regular consistency as I was then, pandemic time. So I was writing every day, had the free time to do it every day. And so I find myself yearning for that connection that I had, and when I write, and it does come in times. Like there was about a week ago where I sat down for a few hours, and it was like, oh, everything was just flowing, and I felt that connection. And so I'm continuing to work through that book, and I just hope and pray that I'll have a lot of that spiritual connection as I continue writing.
So when you talk about going to these spiritual places, right, like these spiritual spaces to work and write and stuff, you mentioned that the pandemic and grief and stuff was contributing to going to those spaces and finding them. What are factors that make you think that, like, hey, I need to look for that mentorship role? Like, I know I'm a coach most of the time now. I'm a little later on in my life. I've got kids and stuff like that, but I need to look up to somebody. I need that mentorship role. How do you spot that to keep your eyes on the horizon and focused on the next steps and goals and into the spaces to stay focused on that?
Yeah, that is an excellent point, Will, because every coach needs a coach, and one of I think it's like Paul Myers, one of the personal development guru from years back, but I think at one point he had like a dozen coaches of his own, and here he was like the leader in personal development. But I've always looked for mentors and people that could help guide me, people that have had experience in areas that I don't. And I'm a consummate learner, looking for ways to understand things, and whether it's reading or taking a course or doing research or speaking to someone, those are areas that I've always looked. And when I first decided to write, I contacted a friend of mine that's been a mentor for years, and his name is Danny Bader, and he's an author. He's now a 4-time author. But when I first met him, he had written one book, and we quickly connected. And he had come to do a presentation at a corporation I was working in back about 11 years ago, and we connected. We had a lot of things in common, and we really connected. And then over the years, we've stayed in touch, and I've brought him into other places where I was working to do training and so forth. And I knew that at that time he had written 3 books, and I said, hey Danny, I'm going to, I'm starting to write. I've decided to finally write this book that's been in my head for all these years, and he gave me some great guidance just in getting started, and helped connect me with some people, that can help me with the publishing process and different things like that. But more importantly, I to your point, Will, I realized that I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think that's a key thing for anyone, whether you're, a coach or you're a CEO or whomever you are, is to realize that there's a lot that you don't know. And that's what I teach to the people I work with, is that yes, you may be the owner of a 7-figure company or 8-figure company, or you may be doing great, have success, quote unquote success by societal definition. That doesn't mean that you have all the answers, and that doesn't mean that you don't need coaching, and you don't need support, and you don't need guidance. And so that's where I realized myself that, hey, I don't have the answers. I don't know many things, and I need to look for outside areas to support me in lots of different ways, to support me in just in education, to support me in just emotional support or moral support, or different ways. Because I think when we, no pun intended, when we open up like that we then we can really be the best version of ourselves, because we can get that guidance that we need.
Right, by interacting and getting together physically and everything too. So I guess we've gone through a little bit of your journey here, because you started as a kid with your dad, who was working hard and drinking a little hard too, and your mom that was around too, also inspiring. And then we got to the pandemic years later. Is there anything in between there that was a specifically like character defining moment for you? I guess I would say, like, not to be cliche here, but a big challenge when you grow up around substance abuse or alcoholism is, even if it's not the same substance, you tend to learn escapism as a coping mechanism, right? So was there ever a time that you had to decide for yourself that you weren't going to resort to escapism the same as you may have seen growing up, kind of thing?
Yeah. I've done a lot of these interviews, like you were saying in the intro, Will. you're the first person to really identify what was happening for me. And I'll as I explain, you'll understand what I mean. But you're the first person, so thank you, because I've never really thought of it that way. But I do know for years, as a coping mechanism, like you said, I would repress my feelings. I mean, growing up, I was always tucking my feelings away, not showing them. Even going back to, like I said, in sports or whatever, I mean, I would always hide my feelings. And then when I became, so I got married young. I met my wife, Tanya. We've been married, we'll be married 26 years this June. So we just had our 25th last year.
Congratulations. This
Thank
year
you.
That deserves congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. But when we first, in the early part of our relationship, and we had been together for a year and a half before we got married. But in the early time of our relationship, emotions were a challenge. Emotions were a challenge for me. And that's where I would, I wouldn't always show my emotions and just, I mean, her own issues from her family growing up. I mean, it wasn't the greatest place for both of us to not share our emotions. And, it would end up, it ends up being like you can pick the cliche you want, like the sweep it under the rug, sweep it under the rug, sweep it under the rug. And then all of a sudden you lift the rug and all this stuff comes out, or, the teapot that explodes or whatever. And what happened was, when we had our oldest daughter, Sierra, right away. And then we had our second daughter, Kinsey, a few years later. And so about 20 years ago, when we were living in Southern California at the time, like Central California, we were, we had our two kids. They were 1 and 4. And we thought, hey, things are good. We had a home. We had, we were working, we were raising a family, and we felt that we were, hey, we're happy and life is good. Well, one Sunday afternoon, we're coming back from a child's birthday party that we had driven down south. It was about 2 hours south from where we lived in Los Angeles. We had gone down to this children's birthday party, and we're driving back in the late afternoon, and the kids are asleep in the back seat, and my wife and I are just kind of chatting about the week. Hey, we need to get home because it's getting late, and then it starts raining kind of out of nowhere, and it starts raining really, really hard, to the point that you can't really see you can't really see, the wipers can't clear the water fast enough. And we see lots of cars had pulled over, and we contemplate pulling over to kind of wait out the storm. But it's starting to get late, and we're worried that it's going to get dark, and then it's going to be even worse. And it's a Sunday, the kids have school, my daughter Sierra at school, and so forth the next day. And we had to work, and we're like, okay, hey, we really need to get home. Like, we just need to continue on. We'll just continue kind of slow. And me being young, when I was younger, I was more of that cocky kind of, hey, yeah, it's no big deal. And, I got this kind of thing. So we continue on, and we're driving in the slow lane, and I don't know if other places they call it slow lane, but the first lane. And all of a sudden, I hit a large puddle of water, and I lose control of the vehicle, and we start spinning out of control.
Hydroplaning,
exactly. Hydroplaning. We start spinning, and we're spinning just in circles, 360 degrees. We spin, and we're spinning, and we spin all the way 4 lanes over to the left. And we're about to crash into the center divider, and I'm trying to steer and brake, and I don't know what I'm doing. And my wife and I are screaming, and all of a sudden we don't hit the center divider, and we start spinning the other direction, and we spin back across the 4 lanes, and we go up a dirt embankment, and we hit a brick wall, and we flip over, and we land back on the wheels.
Wow. So you got some faith there.
Got some faith there, because
or luck, faith, but luck.
Yeah. Faith or luck. Well, yeah, and I'll explain how I looked at it, because the roof was smashed down to about, eye level, and the windshield was shattered, and the right side was all smashed in, and this glass was all shattered, and the car is filled with glass and dirt, and our stuff is everywhere. And miraculously, all of us are okay. I mean, there's no blood, there's no cuts. My wife was a little sore on her shoulder from banging into that side, but we crawl out of the door on my side, and this elderly couple had witnessed the whole thing, and the lady grabs this big blanket out of the trunk, and she wraps it around my wife, who is holding my daughters and sitting on the side of the freeway, just sobbing and thanking God that they're alive, and rocking back and forth. And I'm talking to the gentleman, thanking them for stopping, and he tells me, he says, "I thought you were all killed for sure." When he watched it, and he said, "That's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life." And I really started to kind of reflect on, wow, this might have been a big deal. This might have been more than what I realized. And in that time of reflection that lasted for a few months, I wrote what I called a to-do list for every day. I wrote this list that I kind of wanted to change who I was. I wanted to be more grateful and be more humble. And I wanted to live like it's every day, like it's the last day of your life, and treat others, with respect and kindness. And it was a list of 12 things. And people kept telling me, especially my mom, kept saying, your guardian angel protected you, and this was a miracle. And she gave me this little guardian angel pin, and she asked me to put it in my car on the visor there. And so one day when I was out driving for work, I was parked, and I'm staring up at that guardian angel pin. And during that time, like I said, for a few months, I would often, just kind of find myself just sitting in thought or daydreaming or what have you. And I sitting there staring at this pin, kind of reflecting and thinking about the accident, because I would replay things over and over in my head. And I realized, and all of a sudden I have this idea for a story in my head, like I had just watched it like a movie. And that was the idea for 12 Hours of Heaven. And I say, wow, this is a pretty special story. I should write this. I should write this down. So I soon after I type about a page worth of, like a Word document page. And then I go back to old habits and old, the comfortability of life, and I never do anything with it. And I don't share it. I don't write it. I don't think about it much. And it wasn't until I had gotten to, like, where my father was getting really old, and he had some health scares. And then when he was in the hospital, kind of in the last few weeks of his life, I said, you know what? I told him, because he was an avid reader and he loved to read. And I said, hey, I'm gonna write a book. I'm gonna write that book that I have in my head from all these years. And he was so excited and so proud. He actually pressed the call button to call the nurse and tell her, just at that exact moment, to tell her that I was going to be an author. That's how proud he was. And then I said, hey, I really have to write this. And then, you get back to the pandemic, and that's where, it all came to be, like I've already shared. And I think, to take us full circle, Will, it just shows that, it took me a long time to realize, to get past, I think, I like to think that God's timing is always perfect. And I think, just for me, being as stubborn as I was, that it took me 20 years of growth and development to get to the point to be able to share my emotions, and to not hold things in, and to, be vulnerable, and, going back to the way that my father had grown in those last few years of our life. I think, we're kind of on those similar journeys, and that it was all just part of me becoming who I needed to be, and him becoming who he needed to be before, he left the earth. And now I'm in a place where I have no problem sharing my emotions. And, I'm far more emotional than I was when I was that young guy in that accident. And
grief does that, right? You talked about
Yeah.
a few different near death experiences there, and the actual death experience of your father. Good journey. That's a lot of the times that's what it takes for people to wake up, right? Like a lot of people don't think about getting sober until they're laying in that hospital bed, wondering if they'll ever get up again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess the point of what I'm saying with all that is the grief is really overwhelming. Hopelessness is really overwhelming. The sense of finality of death and time limitations with your loved ones is really overwhelming. So how would you recommend people reach out for help and seek collaboration and support and improvement before they have those like life-changing, like total soul gripping grief experiences?
Yeah, it's a good point because for a lot of people, myself included, they wait until that happens. They wait to seek help until, it's like, I mean, you can think of 100 different analogies, but it's like you're having a car and just waiting until, the engine breaks down to go get it serviced, when you're like, wow, I could just, get some regular oil changes and get some regular maintenance, and then it would be fine. And so I'd say that the same thing applies to, what I've had to learn, because I was that individual that was like, hey, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to do anything until until tragedy strikes, excuse me. And what I've learned over the years, in working with others and on both sides, as a coach and person being coached, is that when you do allow things to come out, a little bit at a time, and build that capacity, if you will, to deal with these things on your own, then you have the ability to deal with them. You have the capacity, and it's like taking your emotions to the gym.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Oh.
It's like taking the emotions to the gym. Excuse me. Thank you. Sorry. Because if your emotional muscle, if your emotional capacity to deal with things is not a well-developed muscle, then all of a sudden, when that grief hits, when that tragedy strikes, then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, what do I do? And then you're trying to do 100 reps of the exercise to build the muscle in a few days or a week's time, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Our muscles have to be stretched and recover and heal over time, and that's why, like, for me, it was 20 years of life experiences to realize this, and grow over time. And I think the lesson that people can learn from, myself or others, is that to continuously be open and share your emotions and allow yourself to recover and to grow from those different situations, and to seek help, like you're saying, to talk about it with your friends, to not be the stoic generation, but to talk about it with your friends and your family and those close, or support groups, or be a part of groups like, Voices of Men 360, to get that support that you need, because that's going to help you be far better off when the tragedy does strike, or when you do lose a loved one, or go through a divorce, or have any other kind of a challenge that you're facing in your life. Your emotional muscle will be more tuned, more strengthened by that point to deal with it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think one thing in our conversation today that is really valuable perspective that you've clearly reflected on a lot, that I think a lot of men and fathers especially need to think about, is you've looked intergenerationally, right? Like what your parents' generation was going through, what you're going through with your partnership, and what your kids are facing. And you've sort of reflected on what weaknesses and stuff might be there, and where your strengths might be, and how to take good things from the older generations and make sure you pass it to the younger generations, and sort of filter out the things that aren't as functional, right? And I think we have so much more of a responsibility to do that as men than we ever acknowledge. And so I just wanted to say thank you. That's really admirable that you've done that. So thanks. I'm going to check out your books for sure.
Well, you're very welcome, Will. Thank you, and thank you for just your gratitude for that, because that's a place that I've really I mean, it's really come most so for myself in the past couple years. So I didn't always have those realizations, and it's just been through a ton of coaching for myself and reading and research and everything to really optimize who I am and who I'm showing up so I can impact others. And so, through iSpark Change, we can help people. I made a commitment to God and to myself when, he gave me the idea for iSpark Change. I said, okay, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna work on this. And our goal at iSpark Change is to impact through our community 1 billion people in the next 5 years. Within 5 years, 1 billion people. And so I made a promise to him and to myself. I said, okay, I'm going to work on this, till the day I die, pretty much, because I know it will take a while just to help make the world a better place. But I said, I'm going to do it. And I realized, that as a faulted human being, that if I'm going to do that, I have to work on myself. Change doesn't come by changing out here. It comes by changing in here. And so that's where I've said, okay, I need to really go on, start working on myself. I mean, really, really working on myself. I think for years, yes, I would do personal development and I work on myself and a lot with work and leadership and stuff like that. Where I took it to another level in the past couple of years is saying, all right, I need to work on multiple areas of myself. And that's where I've grown. Like we've talked about, I've grown emotionally, I've grown spiritually, I've grown mentally and psychologically. I mean, all these different ways. And I'm not saying that to say I'm any great person or anything. I'm saying that to tell others that if you want to start seeing your life improve, or you want to start seeing the world improve, start working on yourself. Start working on that internal change and being the best version of yourself. And you will see everything else become 1,000 times more beautiful and 1,000 times greater.
Oh, absolutely. And I've seen so many men come out with that platform too. And it's such a sign of health, because the ultimate test of any community and ability to cope is when adversity happens, like when stress happens, when fear happens, and it really is like traumatic levels. How does that get processed by the group and what comes out of it, right? And what you've discussed today is being able to face that grief and being able to face the need to cope and escape and just survive with your emotional regulation, and still be accountable to your emotional regulation and how you treat others and are able to support and function as a human, right? Like, I don't know, it's really important. So like, I don't even know where I'm going with that. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we
No, I would just say,
of the show?
Yeah, just based on what you were saying, Will, is that I think a key component of, I was just talking about change and making the world a better place. And I think a key component of that is the internal growth, is the internal work on ourselves and kind of leveling up who we are. That's why we call that challenge Level Up Your Life Challenge, but it is leveling up who we are, because I think anyone can do that. And I think the other part of it is what you just touched on, is the power of community. And that's what we're building with iSpark Change, is that power of community, because so many individuals, and this was how I was for many years, feel that we are just one person. We're too small to make a difference. We're too small to change the world. We're too small to do something great. And it's the people that kind of go against that norm that are the ones that truly change the world. If you look back in history and, even some modern leaders, you'll see that, those people that challenge the status quo, they're the ones that really move things forward and really make the world better. And so I think the message an important message for everyone is that any of us can be that individual. That it doesn't take, you don't have to be like, oh, well, I'm not a world leader, or I'm not this, or I'm not that. It doesn't matter. That's not where it begins. It begins inside, and then it moves to building that community and being a part and showing others, whether it's through Voices of Men 360 or iSpark Change, or, thousands of other communities like ours, that are supportive and are there to show others that, look, we're here because we all want to improve. We all want to grow. We all want to learn. We all want to make the world better. And that's where that strength can, a lot of people can pull from that strength, that group strength and that community strength. And that's what helps to raise everybody up, to level everybody up, because it's challenging to do something on your own. And, there's an old African proverb that says, if you want to go faster, go alone. But if you want to go farther, you go together. And that's where we can all go much farther, and we can all, make the world better faster if we are together and we're working on it as part of that community.
Oh, 100%. And part of what we talked about today in our conversation about that is, when you're approaching a big goal and a huge action plan that you're not qualified for, you're the child. You just need a mentor. So for you to go on that action plan, you just need somebody that's in a position to do it and to try and get in alignment and learning with that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so much of our society emphasizes individuality and individual ability. And we view leadership not as supporting others, but as being this big macho pontification that can provide for everyone, right? And that's toxic masculinity, right? Like, we know that you can't feed 9 billion people no matter what you do as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
We need to work together to do that. So if we have big goals, you got to come at it as working together, right? I don't know. Anyhow, this has been a very good conversation today.
Thank you.
We're on the same page. Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. And I think Will, just on your last point, I think there are a lot of people like you, like me, like Savam, that, like, there's a lot of us out there that are seeing that leadership has evolved and is continuing to evolve. And if we're going to be the leaders for, the future generations that we need to be, then we have to continue to evolve and to not really take the things that we learned when we were younger from those old style militaristic leaders, and that we have to be, modern leaders that are about what I call social impact, social impact leaders, and those that are vulnerable, are authentic, that are open to their flaws, and that realize that they can't do it alone. Like you were just saying, that they need help, and it's going to take all of us to working together. And that's true, that's true leadership. And that's what's going to move us forward.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. I think that might be our show today. I think it's time to move to our closing materials. We've got some other shows going on. I'm just going to touch on if you guys want to check in. Thank you very much for coming in and talking today. That was a great talk. So closing announcements. These are over here. Open Up, as we've mentioned, is a live talk show on Sunday at 10 a.m. every week. We've got Villy, a Tamil live talk show on Sundays at 8. Monthly webinar is the first Saturday of every month at 10:30 Eastern time. We bring expertise in organizations. So this is more connecting with the people, and that show is more connecting with the concepts and the things they're talking about. Sometimes you get to do both, like today. It was really nice. And our monthly special show, The Unspoken Tears, is the second Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern. And the focus is on domestic violence against men, bullying, male sexual abuse, traumas, porn addictions, and human trafficking. Big problems. Men can do a lot to help. Author Circle. We want to bring individuals who have been contributing to the well-being of men and boys through writings, articles, media, and recognize them. Appreciate them. That's on the third Saturday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern time. We've got a podcast. All our shows are available on 6 platforms, including iPhone, Google Play, and so on. All of your favorite places to get podcasts. And monthly men's group meeting. It's for men by men every 2 weeks on Tuesdays from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. through Zoom. The next one will be Tuesday, February 22nd. Please join on Zoom. The link is available on our Facebook group if you want to come out to that. We were talking about opening up. That's a place you can open up. Pass the Talking Stick Indigenous peer-to-peer support group is 4th Friday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. through Zoom. There are no limitations with gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups for anything we do. All walks of life can participate in any and all of our shows. If you want to be a guest on any of our shows or are willing to be part of our organization to help us directly or indirectly, come out. We all need to come together and open up. That's what we do as Voice of Men. And we would love to work with individuals, professionals, experts, communities, organizations, and anybody that wants to work with us. Associations, corporations, government officials, and businesses. We all have work to contribute. You can find us on all of our social medias, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Comment below if you have anything you'd like us to talk about, or if you liked anything in this show, we will get back to you. And yeah, thanks for coming out. That's Voice of Men 360 open up for today. Thank you.